Resident Evil, the hit franchise with various zombie types, living bioweapons, Napoleon's unsuccessful lineage, 8-foot vampire ladies, and evil blonde Neo saying
What?
Yeah man, I'm finally getting to make my review, and although everyone is talking about Village, I decided to finally play the game that was in my library for the longest. After one whole year, I finally got around to playing Resident Evil 3 Remake, and I got some stuff to say. So yeah, kick back, give me a few minutes, and I'll give you a proper review of Resident Evil 3 Remake, 1 year later. Yo. First off, let's talk about the content provided. Just like RE2 Remake, this Resident Evil has a huge emphasis on replayability. Before I had my first crack at playing the game, I saw a lot, and I mean a lot, of reviews on all platforms, blogs, and forums filled with players who complained about how short the game is. To be frank, they weren't wrong. RE3 Remake story-wise is pretty short, but there's reasons for this, and we'll get to that nitty-gritty throughout the video. The good thing about this installment is that they offer a considerable amount to do during and after the campaign. If you plan to have multiple runs, you should know there are 5 difficulties or modes for the campaign: Assisted, Standard, Hardcore, Nightmare, and Inferno modes. Listen, as much of a Resident Evil fan as I am, I'm not playing Nightmare and Inferno mode. It's not necessary. Besides, I got too many games in my Steam library I gotta get to beating anyway. When first launching the game, the first 3 modes are available: Assisted, Standard, and Hardcore. My recommendations for first playthrough goes as follows. If you're a super duper newbie to Resident Evil, or you're not really good at fundamentals of gaming, go with Assisted. Of course, if you've played a fair amount of games in your life, especially third-person games, Standard is good. Lastly, if you've played every installment in the franchise, beat each at least 20 times, know the ins and outs of the games, have no feelings, and are adrenaline junkie, go with Hardcore, my guy. If you care, like if you actually care about playing the extra modes, you gotta get your stripes to unlock them. The only way to unlock Nightmare is to complete the campaign on Hardcore, and to get Inferno, you have to complete it on Nightmare. Now again, the story is pretty short. Replayability is overemphasized because when you beat the game, you earn points that can allow you to purchase bonus content like outfits, concept art, and most important, bonus items. Items like the same guns in the game, but with infinite ammo. Extra pouches to increase inventory from the get-go, the lockpick, bolt cutter. The most critical items are the ones that increase stats like ammo, vitality, defense, and attack power. For instance, one of my favorites is the Hot Dogger, which is a knife that sets opponents on fire. What's even better is, unlike RE2, using bonus items doesn't affect the rating system by the end of the game, presumably because of the difficulties associated with Nightmare and Inferno modes. I highly suggest investing into the bonus tools like the extra pouches, lockpick, bolt cutter, or the stat boosting coins instead of the flashy infinite guns first. They will severely help with the more difficult campaign modes, but depending on your playstyle, choose whichever items you deem more useful to you. Now onto the gameplay. As Resident Evil games should and tend to be, it's all about the horror. Being very similar to RE2 Remake, RE3 runs on the same engine and is pretty much a palette swap. But as usual, the remakes try to be consistent with how the originals were. Even though I played the original Resident Evil 2 on OG PlayStation, I never had the opportunity to play Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Yet, I was aware of how the game mechanics function. Through word of mouth from my friends in elementary school and later on watching playthroughs on YouTube, I knew that RE3 had an action-packed twist to the series. I can say for sure that RE3 is a step above RE2, exclusively because of the dodge mechanic. Thank the creator, man. One of my biggest gripes concerning RE2 was the lackluster saving throw mechanic. While it did provide an escape and harmed your enemies, in my eyes, the fact that Leon and Claire were made to stab zombies in the chest instead of their heads made it completely useless. With Jill, you now have the opportunity to completely dodge the enemy's attack, and if timed correctly, she does a perfect dodge that showcases Jill rolling out of harm's way and the opportunity for the counter shot using bullet time. You also get to do this with Carlos as well, but unlike Jill, Carlos is too macho to dodge. So instead, he gun butts enemies to push them back. When timed correctly, he throws a straight right that'll have Captain Falcon proud.
Falcon Punch!
As usual, with all Resident Evil titles in the series, you as the protagonist always start out with a handgun. Then gradually, over the course of the game, you gain more useful items and weapons. Most of the items upgrades are available to you if you're willing to put in the work to get them. For instance, some weapons like the shotgun and special items like the blue jewel can only be acquired if you get the bolt cutter and come back to the area that they're locked up in. On the other hand, some weapon upgrades can only be acquired from Nemesis himself. It's a neat way for the game developers to get players to engage more with the Tyrant. But of course, we still have our puzzles and saves to unlock that give us extra useful items too. I love the emphasis that they put on Jill and Carlos' skills as experts and professionals. Both are noticeably faster when running and aren't as clumsy or unreliable in encounters like Leon and Claire were in RE2. Just the way that Jill uses her knife when striking is marvelous. She slightly squats for balance, squares up with the knife in her lead hand, with the rear hand up to her face in a boxing stance. After a few jabs with the knife, she even jumps back with a perfect hop step, showing that she's been trained and this ain't her first rodeo. Our list of opposition in the game is pretty staggering. Starting from familiar to new, we first have of course, standard zombies, lickers, and zombie dogs. Then surprisingly, the parasite zombie drops in, an enemy type that was first introduced in RE4, but this time, the parasite is not from Las Plagas, but they're infected zombies controlled by Nemesis himself. Next we have our first look at the hunters, who are pretty quick and deadly, followed by the hunter Gamma, which like the G-embryos are found in the sewers, the insect-like Drain Demos, who are excruciatingly annoying, Pale Heads, who are super elusive and bullet sponges. My recommendation is with one good magnum shot to the head and you're good to go. Then finally, we got our boy himself, Nemesis, in all his devolutions. It was exciting to see how he would stalk you like Mr. X, but if you get too far away, will pull you with his tentacle or just straight up sprint after you to perform a rushing clothesline. It really showed how human-like he was, from his mannerisms to his minor speech pattern. All these enemy types will keep you on your toes. This time around, it will trip you up if you're not careful. The city itself feels like a playground, with explosive barrels, boxes to crack open, and street debris to use to your advantage. Even different environments to exploit like the police station, sewers, hospital, and the underground umbrella facility open up a whole slew of avenues to be creative on your way to the end goal. Overall, with the combination of items in the campaign and bonus shop, Jill and Carlos' functionality, enemy types encountered in different environments, gives RE3 an action-packed twist that most remember from the original PlayStation game. Now let's get to the visuals. I mainly played 1440p resolution, so I didn't get the max potential of graphical detail. I honestly think it didn't matter as long as it was 1080p, but man, listen, this RE engine is fantastic. Even though it's a palette swap of RE2 Remake, we saw how the engine has boosted the graphical quality starting from Resident Evil 7 to Devil May Cry and then now Village. This game is stunning. From the character models to the bioweapons to the environments, I mean all the cutscenes use the in-game engine. That should tell you how much emphasis Capcom and the Resident Evil team put into the final product of the remake. Jill's model is a visual upgrade from her previous look in the original. Her tactical outfit in the remake contrasts her background as a special task force member of the RBD. Her character model is but she fits way more than the model they decided to go with for Claire. A lot of detail was paid attention to. The way her hair bounces when moving, her anatomy was proportionate, and her reactions were very realistic in many situations, even when dodging. Carlos's upgrade was appreciated, but I think they went a little too grungy for his personality. Wasn't really digging the cut, but his build and tactical hardware match his occupation for being a member of the UBCS. All the supporting characters and civilians encountered were phenomenally crafted. The zombies and bioweapons as well were very crafted. Each enemy type had their own way of bringing out terror the first time encountering them. For instance, how the hunter Gammas will hop into scene in front of Jill like a giant albino frog and stalk you like a rooster who sees bird food. Or how the Nemesis' deformed face was revealed and over time his body would devolve and mutate the more you encounter him. Raccoon City itself was well crafted. The streets, the facilities, stations, the lights, cars, 90s posters, and even giant Mr. Charlie doll head. Some of the best details I've seen are present in the item descriptions. They really went above and beyond. The one gripe I have with the environment is that I wish that it was more destructible, but all in all, I'm not complaining much. On to one of the most important aspects of the game, the plot. I've got to admit, this wasn't the best story, because as we've come to know throughout the past year, this was a pretty short campaign and felt like a story crunch, but served as kinda like a fill in the holes for RE2 Remake's campaign. Our main protagonist was none other than Jill Valentine, who returns from the first game in the series sharing the spotlight with Chris Redfield. The beginning of the story started out good. Jill wakes up in her apartment after a brief nightmare, and immediately after a call from Brad, Nemesis attacks her, but after evading death in her apartment building, she meets up with Brad, and they kinda like have a casual stroll throughout the city amidst the chaos. He immediately gets bit like a dumbass. Who in the hell holds the door closed with man-eating zombies on the other side with one arm, and not expect to slip up and get bit? Seriously, like I know this is a fictional story, but there are multiple instances where things don't make sense, especially if you're trying to portray said fictional story as real as possible. For instance here, how did she not get internal bleeding or broken bones? Or here, how the hell did she survive that fall from the top of a 5-story building? Seatbelts are not that effective. Or this fall, how did her limbs not get blown off here? Why didn't Nemesis not just crush her head here? So many other instances of the same hogwash. It's almost as if she's superhuman or something. I'm guessing it makes sense due to her surviving the events of the first game and in the Arclay Mountains. I know she's a trained operative, but her attitude towards Nemesis is of him being a bother, instead of a constant overbearing threat to her life. The only time I feel she actually is afraid is when in contact with Nikolai, who in my opinion was the best casting choice out of all the character models. Whoever that actor is, great job my guy. Every time Nikolai is in a cutscene is fantastic. His evil scheming and treacherous personality gave so much depth to the overall makeup of the mercenary team. Moving on, the relationship between Jill and Carlos was still a bit cheesy at first. He saves her from Nemesis and is all head over heels white knighting, and Jill is playing hard to get. Then it turns into this weird, playful banter and flirting all in the first 20 minutes of the game. As the story progresses, you can see how their relationship blossoms with their common goal of escaping the city, saving the civilians, and uncovering Umbrella's machinations. Speaking of Carlos, playing as him was pretty enjoyable. As I said before, his character design was a bit too grungy. For starters, him having shaggy hair falling in front of his eyes would not help him being an effective operative in real life. He would either have to cut his hair or put it in a ponytail, but otherwise, I think the casting was done correct and his UBCS uniform worked out. Playing as him in the police station and hospital was interesting, using this moment to show how Marvin became fatally injured before the events of RE2 at the hand of Zombie Brad. His sections in the game also help highlight his friendship with Tyrell, and it seems it was done on purpose to give some sort of inclusion for non-white characters. You ain't slick, Capcom. I see the low-key black and brown coalition you had going on with the homies Black Tie and Loso's Way. Although we got to play as him at the police station, we really got some shine at the hospital, trying to rescue Dr. Bard while trying to find a cure for Jill after her 6th encounter with Nemesis. Most importantly, he was the first to encounter the hunters, and at the end of his run, we got the opportunity to hold off a swarm of zombies, trying to get to and indispose Jill and an injured Tyrell. After his exploits, Jill is cured, then her and Tyrell follow after Carlos into the lower levels into the underground Umbrella facility one day later, where Jill has to manufacture a cure sample and make it out before the US military bombs the city to smithereens. And then they did my boy dirty. I mean, it's in every scary movie. I don't know why I expected any less. Carlos didn't even ask about Tyrell. I guess bros over hoes don't mean anything to him. After a final scrap with Nemesis and chasing after Nikolai with the last sample, Jill and Carlos were able to double team Nikolai and leave him for dead, as they fly off in a copter away from the city being nuked. After a year of being out in the market, is RE3 Remake worth the playthrough? I say, if you're a Resident Evil fan, into the survival horror genre, like dismembering and fucking with zombies, I say yeah, go ahead. Otherwise, if you just want to get the story, or could give a rat's ass about survival horror, just watch some playthroughs on YouTube, or read up on the Resident Evil wiki. If you appreciated this review and want to see some more game reviews coming up on the channel, subscribe and click that bell to notify when new reviews and other videos are uploaded to the channel. Remember to drop a like to help your boy with the YouTube algorithm. You know the vibes. It's Kaizoku Sleven. Appreciate you.